"Holy cow!" the human exclaimed, eyes going wide before that upward mouth curve intensified dramatically. "Are you guys for real? Jenkins, are you seeing this? They look like someone took a crocodile, a dragon, and a very angry bodybuilder and put them all in a blender together." The silence on my bridge was absolute. I blinked all three eyes in sequence, a Coratheian gesture of profound confusion, and gathered myself. "I am Commander Vecklish of the Coratheian Empire," I began, using my deepest, most resonant vocal register, the one I reserve for moments of maximum gravitas. "You stand before the assembled might of 300 Imperial warships. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our glorious civilization. You will submit your governing bodies for processing, dismantle your military forces, and prepare to accept Imperial law. Failure to comply will result in—" "Dude," the human interrupted. It actually waved at me, a small, dismissive flap of its tiny appendage. Hold on a second." It turned sideways, apparently addressing someone off-screen. "Jenkins, are you recording this? This is comedy gold. Man, listen to this guy. He sounds like he rehearsed this in the shower." A second voice drifted in from somewhere beyond the camera's reach, presumably the Jenkins creature. "Oh man, Rick, this is incredible. Do you think they do parties? My kid would love this for his birthday." The human, Rick, apparently, turned back to face me. His face had twisted into a peculiar configuration that I would learn, over the coming weeks, to identify with soul-crushing familiarity. He was trying not to laugh. The effort was not going particularly well. "Okay," Rick managed, pressing a hand over his mouth. "Okay, sorry, I am being rude. Please continue with your terrifying conquest speech. We are super scared over here, absolutely quaking in our boots. Please do not incorporate us." The last sentence was delivered in the most aggressively insincere tone I had ever encountered in 4 decades of first contact spanning hundreds of civilizations. Behind me, I heard Frex's whisper with careful quietness, say, "What is happening?" I had no answer for him. "Commander Vecklish." Right, Vecklish, sorry." Rick was grinning openly now, all pretense of suppressed laughter abandoned. "Listen, I am just a cargo hauler. I want to be upfront about that. But I have got to tell you, this whole intimidating alien empire thing, the glowing ships, the dramatic formation, the ominous voice modulation." He made a gesture I did not understand, but which conveyed obvious appreciation. "Chef's kiss, my friend. Solid 8 out of 10 for presentation. You would have scored a 9, but the anthem is a bit much. Feels like you are trying too hard. It is giving very much. We need everyone to know we are scary energy, you know?" Something behind my left eye began to throb. "You dare mock the Coratheian Empire." My voice climbed registers, reverberating off the walls of his pathetic cockpit with enough force to rattle loose components. "We have brought 1,000 worlds to heal. We have crushed armadas that would blot out your sun. We possess weapons that can crack planets like eggs." The word had barely left my secondary jaw when Rick slapped his control panel so hard that 3 indicator lights blinked out. "Jenkins." He was barely coherent. "Jenkins," he said eggs. "This man is absolutely killing me." "I am not trying to kill you." I roared. "I am trying to conquer you." What followed was approximately 4 to 5 seconds of a human being physically incapable of forming words. Frexus leaned toward me, his voice barely above a breath. "Commander, perhaps this specimen is defective. Should we request contact with their actual leadership?" I nodded, grateful for the suggestion and deeply unsettled by the fact that I needed it. "Human Rick." I forced my voice back down to a register befitting my station. "I demand to speak with your planetary government immediately. These matters are far beyond the purview of civilian cargo haulers." "Oh, sure." Rick wiped moisture from the corners of his eyes, a physiological response to the laughter, I would later learn. "No problem at all. Let me patch you through to Earth Defense Command. Fair warning, His grin widened to something that should not have been anatomically possible. "They are probably going to enjoy this even more than I did. Jenkins, transfer him to EDC Channel 7. Tell them we have got a comedian in Sector 4. The screen went dark for a moment, Then a new human appeared. This one wore a military uniform. Simple, almost insultingly plain compared to the ceremonial complexity of my own armor, but worn with the ease of someone who had stopped needing to perform authority long ago. She had short dark hair and a collection of colored geometric shapes pinned to her chest that I assumed indicated rank. Her posture was straight without being stiff, and her eyes, those strange, limited, two-eyed human eyes, were sharp and immediately assessing. "This is Admiral Patricia Kowalski, Earth Defense Command," she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, controlled. Then she actually looked at me, and I watched the corner of her mouth develop a life of its own. Oh, wow. She blinked once. Rick really was not kidding. "You are really committing to the bit, aren't you?" "This is not a bit," I said, with considerable restraint. "We picked up your broadcast when you arrived," Kowalski said, seamlessly redirecting as if I hadn't spoken. "The anthem was a nice touch, incidentally. Very dramatic. A little derivative. Reminds me of something from a 19th century Earth composer, actually, but I appreciate the effort." She leaned forward, resting her chin on her folded hands, studying me with a detached interest of someone examining a mildly unusual but ultimately harmless geological specimen. "So, let me guess. You want us to surrender unconditionally, hand over all our resources, dismantle our governments, submit to your benevolent rule, the standard package, yes?" I felt something approaching hope. Finally, a human who understood the situation. "Yes, precisely. You have 72 of your standard hours to—" "Yeah, we're going to pass on that," Kowalski said pleasantly. "Thanks so much for stopping by. Though, safe travels. Don't let the airlock hit you on the way out." The words landed in the silence of my bridge like stones dropped into a still pond. I stared at her. Frexa stared at her. My entire senior bridge crew stared at her. I had to physically locate my voice, which seemed to have retreated somewhere near my secondary stomach. "You are refusing." "Refusing implies we actually considered it," Kowalski replied, examining her fingernails with an air of profound indifference. "This is more like, I don't know, declining a timeshare presentation. Look, Commander, I'm sure your whole intimidation routine plays brilliantly with other species, but we humans have been threatening each other for literally thousands of years. We have gotten extraordinarily good at recognizing the shape of a threat. Yours is—" She paused, and the pause itself was devastating. "Well, it's cute, but it lacks a certain genuine menace." "Cute." The word emerged from somewhere I did not fully control. "We have atomized civilizations. We have brought extinction to species that defied us. We invented nuclear weapons," Kowalski said pleasantly, "while we were still using propeller-driven aircraft. We then pointed thousands of them at ourselves and held that position for approximately half a century, just to see who would blink first. A beat. Nobody did. We are somewhat insane like that." Behind her, I could see the shapes of other humans at various stations. Several of them had turned away from their consoles entirely and were engaged in the battle of their lives against open laughter. One was pressing both hands over its mouth. Another appeared to be making sounds that the translator rendered bafflingly as snorting. "Admiral," I said, deploying every ounce of professional composure I had accumulated across 4 to 7 conquests, "perhaps you do not fully understand the gravity of—" "Oh, we understand gravity just fine," a cheerful voice called from somewhere off-screen. "We understand yours too. Actually, your flagship is generating approximately 1.3 standard GS, which means your artificial gravity compensators are genuinely impressive. I'll give you that. The mathematics are elegant." Kowalski's mouth twitched. That was Lieutenant Chen, our science officer. He gets enthusiastic about technical specifications. She folded her hands again with the serenity of someone who had already won, and was simply being polite about it. "Commander Vecklish, I apologize. Did I say that correctly? Here's the thing. We appreciate you coming all this way. The light show was genuinely spectacular, and we mean that sincerely, but we are not interested in being incorporated, assimilated, conquered, annexed, or otherwise absorbed. So here's my suggestion. Turn those 300 beautiful ships around, go back to wherever you came from, and we'll both pretend this particular Tuesday never happened. No hard feelings." Something cracked inside my chest. Not a physical thing, something older and deeper than bone. "You have 72 hours," I repeated, and even to my own ears the words sounded thin. "Submit or face annihilation." "Sure thing," Kowalski said, giving me a cheerful salute that somehow managed to be both perfectly correct in its form and completely devastating in its casualness. "We'll get right on that. Kowalski out." The screen went dark. For a very long moment, my bridge was the quietest place in the known galaxy. Then Threxus cleared his throat. "Sir," he said carefully, "what just happened?" "I genuinely don't know," I admitted, which was the most honest thing I had said in years. "But I intend to find out." 72 hours passed. The humans did not surrender. They did not acknowledge our ultimatum. They did not even have the decency to appear frightened. They simply continued their daily existence as if 300 Coratheian warships were not parked at the edge of their solar system, humming with barely restrained destructive potential. Their orbital station continued its rotation. Their satellites continued transmitting. Their cooking competition channels continued broadcasting. Someone on high command wanted results. I needed a demonstration. "Subcommander Threxus," I said, rising from the throne with the kind of deliberate authority that had preceded every military action of my career. "Initiate Protocol 17. Full military demonstration. Let them remember what they are dealing with." Threxus straightened, his scale flushing with a warm bronze of professional anticipation. "All ships, assume attack posture gamma. Charge primary weapons to 60%. Prepare for synchronized firing display. Target the uninhabited moon of the fourth gas giant." What happened next was, objectively, one of the most impressive things I have ever witnessed. 300 ships moved in absolute concert, rearranging from standard patrol formation into the three-dimensional configuration we call the descending talon, a pattern that, from the perspective of anyone watching from a planet's surface, looked exactly like the claw of a god reaching down from heaven. Our weapon ports brightened in sequence, cycling from red to orange to white. The hum of 300 plasma lances charging simultaneously was a sound that had unmade the courage of generals across a dozen worlds. Fire! The beams converged. The moon, a barren, frozen rock the size of a large city, became, for approximately 8 seconds, something that rivaled a small star in brightness. Then it fractured. Great chunks of ancient stone, some of them the size of mountain ranges, tore free and spun away into the void. Within 30 seconds, what had been a moon was an expanding field of debris slowly catching the light of a distant sun. It was, even by the standards of someone who has ordered such things before, genuinely sobering to watch. Broadcast that on all human channels. I ordered every frequency. I want every living creature on that planet to understand what they just witnessed. A few moments later, Threxus looked up from his console with an expression I couldn't quite name. "Commander, we have a response." Kowalski appeared on screen again. This time she was holding a small ceramic container from which steam rose gently, and she was leaning back in her chair with the body language of someone watching a fireworks display from a comfortable distance. "Hey, Commander," she said warmly. "Thanks for the show. That was seriously impressive firepower. We have been running the energy output numbers, and I've got to tell you, those plasma projectors are remarkable. Genuine question. Did you develop that technology internally, or acquire it from somewhere else? No judgment either way. Asking for our science division." I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "Did you not see what we just did to that moon?" "Oh, totally," Kowalski confirmed, taking a sip from her container. "Stellar performance. Literally. But here's the thing, Commander, that moon was already dead. No atmosphere, no biosphere, nothing living anywhere on its surface. You essentially spent an enormous amount of energy turning large rocks into smaller rocks." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "We've been doing something functionally similar for mining purposes for about 50 years. Our version takes longer, admittedly, but the underlying principle is identical." "We could do that to your planet," I said. "Could you, though?" The screen split. A new human appeared alongside Kowalski, this one in a darker blue uniform, with bronze skin and dark eyes that carried an unsettling quality of complete and total ease. She had her feet propped on her console in a gesture of physical comfort so casual it constituted an act of psychological warfare. "Captain Rebecca Torres," she said. "Diplomatic Corps. Sorry to interrupt. Lovely destruction display. Truly. But I think we need to have a different kind of conversation." "There is nothing to discuss," I said. "Surrender or—" "You keep saying that," Torres observed, "and I keep not feeling it." She glanced around at her surroundings as if just noticing them. "You know what's interesting? You showed up with 300 ships, blew up a moon we weren't using, and expected us to collapse from Fae." She looked back at me with an expression of genuine, almost sympathetic curiosity. "Doesn't that strike you as a little bit, I don't know, optimistic?" "Admiral Kowalski," I said, redirecting away from Torres's unsettling calm. "Perhaps you—" "Oh, she's right, though," Kowalski said pleasantly. "Let me tell you something about us," Torres continued, sitting forward slightly. "About 200 years ago, we split the atom. We figured out how to release the energy that holds matter itself together. And the very first thing we did with that knowledge, the first thing, the immediate application, was build weapons. We dropped them on ourselves." She paused to let that settle. "We then spend the next 50 years pointing thousands of those weapons at each other from across continents and holding that position indefinitely, daring the other side to move first. Nobody did. We scared ourselves so badly with our own capabilities that we came within a few poor decisions of ending our entire civilization. And then we kept going anyway." She let a beat of silence exist. Nuclear war, climate collapse, engineered plagues, artificial intelligence gone wrong, a nanotechnology incident I'm not cleared to fully discuss, and at least one particle accelerator situation that I'm told nobody in the physics community particularly wants to revisit. We have stood at the edge of extinction 6 separate times. She met my eyes steadily. "And we are still here, Commander, every single time. We pulled back from the edge and kept going. You want to know what that does to a species psychologically? It makes threats boring." In the silence that followed, I heard someone on my bridge shift uncomfortably. "You are." I searched for the word. "You are insane." "Probably," Torres agreed with complete cheerfulness. "That's kind of our thing. We're the species that looked at space, that absolute void of radiation and cold and death in every direction, and said, let's go play in that. We're the species that sat at the bottom of a food chain we weren't built to dominate and decided anyway that we would reach the top of it. We're persistence predators. Commander, we don't stop. We don't give up. We don't back down." She swung her feet down from the console and leaned forward, and something in her eyes shifted, not to hostility, but to something quieter and more absolute. "And we do not respond well to threats." She let the silence breathe. "So here is my counteroffer. You leave, right now. You take your 300 ships back to your empire, and you tell High Command that humanity politely declined. In exchange, we won't embarrass you further, because I promise you, Commander Vecklish, this can get significantly worse for you." I felt my scales prickle. "Worse? You have no weapons that can reach us. Your technology. Is it behind ours, though?" Torres tilted her head. "Genuine question. Tell me, how many ships do you have in your fleet?" 300, I said, "as you well know." "And how many can you see right now on your tactical display?" I glanced at Threxus. Threxus checked his console. "All of them," he said. "Obviously." Torres smiled. It was the slowest, most deliberate smile I have ever seen on any face in any species. "Wrong answer," she said softly. "You can see 297. The cold that moved through my chest had nothing to do with the environmental systems. 3 of them," Torres said, "are ours." The security sweep took 11 minutes. 23 humans were found aboard 3 of my warships, moving through corridors and maintenance shafts with the ease of people who had been there long enough to learn the layout. They were in engineering bays taking detailed measurements of our power distribution systems. They were in storage areas cataloging our supply manifests. One of them, I want to be completely accurate here, was asleep in an auxiliary cargo bay, curled up on a folded thermal blanket she had apparently found in a supply locker, with a handwritten note nearby that read, "Taking a nap, back in 20, don't move anything." They surrendered without resistance. They were cheerful about it. Oh yeah, we got everything we needed anyway. One of them explained pleasantly to the security officer who escorted him off the ship. Your propulsion system is fascinating. By the way, the harmonic dampening on the tertiary drive is doing something really clever. You should be proud of that. The security officer did not know how to respond to this. Neither did I. Invite Captain Torres aboard the flagship, I told Phrexus, with what I hope was unreadable calm. Formal negotiations. Grand Chamber. Full ceremonial protocol. If they want to play games, we will play on our terms, in our space. I paused. Activate every intimidation feature. Phrexus looked at me for a moment. Sir, is that wise? They have already demonstrated. Which is precisely why I need to understand them better. I settled my ceremonial cloak around my shoulders. Prepare the room. 3 hours later, a small human shuttle docked with the Eternal Dominion. I watched the arrival feed as 3 humans descended the boarding ramp. Torres led the way in a formal uniform hung with medals and ribbons that actually showed some thought for design, moving with the loose-limbed ease of someone perpetually comfortable in their own skin. Behind her came a tall human male in what appeared to be a technician's jumpsuit covered in pockets, an almost comical number of pockets, whose eyes were already moving across the interior of our docking bay with barely contained hunger. The third was a smaller woman with immaculate posture and dark hair swept back with precision, wearing formal robes that were the first thing any human had worn in this entire encounter that communicated genuine diplomatic gravity. My honor guard reported, "Commander, they are laughing about something." I closed my eyes briefly. The grand negotiation chamber of the Eternal Dominion had been designed by the finest architects in the Empire specifically to make organic beings feel small. The ceiling rose 40 meters, carved from obsidian quarry from the heart of a dead star. The throne of authority sat elevated 3 meters above the floor on a dais of black stone, surrounded by my 12 most decorated officers arranged in a traditional circle of power. The lighting was precisely calibrated, dim enough to cast dramatic shadows, bright enough to illuminate me and my officers in ways that maximize visual impact. Holographic displays covering every wall cycled through footage of Imperial military engagements, the conquest of worlds, the signing of surrender documents by beings who had run out of options. The temperature had been lowered to a point uncomfortable for most carbon-based life. The acoustics were engineered to make voices from the throne echo with unnatural resonance. Every detail, every element, had been chosen to communicate one thing: you are powerless here. The doors opened with a sound like distant thunder. Torres walked in, stopped 2 steps inside the entrance, and looked around with the expression of someone who had just walked into something unexpectedly delightful. "Wow," she said. "Okay, this is really something. Marcus, look at this place. It's like if a supervillain's lair and a Gothic cathedral had a baby together." The technician, Marcus, walked directly past her and straight to the nearest wall, pressing his palm flat against the metal plating and tilting his head in concentration. "Fascinating. Is this a reinforced dural composite or some kind of titanium alloy? Because the molecular structure feels like, oh, Torres, they have a self-healing nanolayer in the material. This is extraordinary. The applications alone would." "Marcus." Torres's voice was patient in the way of someone who had delivered that exact correction many times. "Diplomacy. We are here for diplomacy." Right, yes." He straightened up, though his eyes kept drifting back to the wall. "Sorry, I'm focused." The third human, Nakamura, stepped forward with measured composure. She stopped at the appropriate distance, inclined her head in a respectful bow, and spoke with clear, careful diction. "Commander Vecklish, I am Diplomat Lisa Nakamura. Thank you for agreeing to receive us. Your vessel is genuinely impressive." I felt the knot behind my secondary jaw loosen fractionally. Finally, a human with functional social awareness. "You are welcome, Diplomat Nakamura," I said, from the full resonant height of the throne. "Approach the throne of authority. All of you." They crossed the chamber, Torres with her hands in her pockets, Marcus with his eyes cataloging everything, Nakamura with her back perfectly straight. And as they crossed that vast dark floor, I watched them look up at me on my elevated seat, flanked by my officers, illuminated by the spotlight array, and I waited for the weight of it to land on them the way it had landed on every other delegation that had ever stood in this room. Torres looked up at me for a long moment, Then she said, "Is that throne actually comfortable? Because it looks beautiful, but it also looks like it would absolutely destroy your back over a long session." Someone on my bridge crew made a sound. I chose not to acknowledge it. "Before we begin," I said, deploying every harmonic layer of my command voice simultaneously, "you should understand that you stand in the very heart of Coratheian power. From this chamber, I have accepted the formal surrender of 4 to 7 civilizations. The weight of imperial authority is not a metaphor. It presses down upon those who stand here. Do you feel it?" Torres shifted her weight. "Is that what that is?" she said thoughtfully. "I thought you just had the air conditioning turned up too high." She glanced at Marcus. "You've got a jacket, right?" "Always prepared," Marcus confirmed, producing a garment from one of his many pockets with the ease of a conjurer. "You want one too, Lisa?" "I am fine, thank you," Nakamura said, although I observed her suppress a slight shiver. Torres shrugged into the jacket. "Much better. Okay, Vecklish." She caught my expression. "Commander Vecklish. Apologies. Very nice room. Excellent evil layer energy. Shall we get down to business?" "You dare address me. Would you prefer the full formal thing?" Torres interrupted, not unkindly. "Because we can do that. I am Captain Rebecca Maria Torres, recipient of the Solar Cross, veteran of the Titan conflict, 3-time winner of the Lunar Base Poker Championship. And yes, that last one is on the official title list. I checked, diplomatic envoy of the United Earth government." She gestured at me with a small, open-handed wave. "Your turn." Despite everything, despite the circumstances, despite the 4 to 7 years of discipline I had wrapped around myself like armor, I stood up slightly straighter. "I am Commander Vecklish, Thirdclaw of the Coratheian Empire, conqueror of 4 to 7 worlds, bearer of the Crimson Talon, master of the Stellar Vanguard, voice of the Imperial Throne." A respectful pause. "Okay," Torres said. "You absolutely win on titles. Sit down, everyone. Wait." She looked around. "There are no chairs. There are no chairs provided for supplicants before the throne of authority," Threxus growled. "No problem," Marcus said. He sat down cross-legged on the floor as naturally as if he had been planning to do exactly that, reached into a pocket, produced a wrapped package, and began unwrapping it. The smell hit the chamber immediately, something cooked and spiced and warm that had absolutely no business existing in this base. "Anyone want a sandwich? I packed enough for everyone." The silence that followed was so profound that I could hear the atmospheric processes breathing. "You brought food. I managed. Negotiations can run long," Marcus said reasonably, taking a bite. "I get difficult to work with when I'm hungry. Lisa always says to pack provisions." He held half a sandwich toward Torres. "Want some?" "Absolutely." Torres sat down next to him on the floor of my grand negotiation chamber, beneath the gaze of my 12 decorated officers, in the shadow of the throne of authority, and accepted the food with every appearance of someone settling in for a pleasant afternoon. She took a bite, made an appreciative sound, then looked up at Nakamura. "Lisa, you sure?" Nakamura stood for 3 more seconds with perfect posture and considerable dignity. Then she sat down gracefully, arranged her robes around her, and said, "I suppose we are doing this informally, then." "This is an outrage," one of my junior officers burst out, unable to contain himself. "You sit on the floor before the commander like children at a picnic." "First of all," Marcus said pleasantly, holding up a finger, "picnics are legitimately underrated as a social format. Second, you didn't provide chairs. Third," he pressed his palm to the floor, "is this floor heated? Vecklish, is your floor heated?" I looked at Threxus. Threxus looked at me. "It is a self-regulating temperature system," Threxus admitted, with a pained expression of someone betrayed by relevant facts. "It adjusts to the comfort preferences of those present." "See," Marcus said, pointing at Torres with genuine excitement, "that is exactly the kind of technology we want to talk about. Not the conquest side of things, the practical applications. Do you know how transformative heated floors would be on Mars? The colony infrastructure alone." "Marcus," Nakamura said. "Right, yes, diplomacy." Torres finished her food, brushed her hands together, and looked up at me. All the lightness remained in her face, but something underneath it had shifted, solidified into something that commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with elevated thrones or ceremonial lighting. "Commander," she said, "let's stop dancing. You want us to join your empire. We're not going to do that. But maybe we can find something else. Something where nobody blows up any more moons, and everyone walks away better off than they arrived." She tilted her head. "What do you say? Why would the Coratheian Empire negotiate with a primitive world?" I asked. "Because we're not as primitive as you think," Torres said. "And because if you actually try to conquer us," she held my gaze without wavering, "you will lose. Not might lose. Will lose. And that is going to be deeply, profoundly, historically embarrassing for you." The temperature in the chamber dropped another degree, and this time the environmental system had nothing to do with it. I descended from the throne, not because protocol demanded it, not because I had been told to, but because, for the first time in 4 to 7 years of conquest, remaining elevated above these three humans felt like a lie I was no longer willing to tell about myself. My boot, weighted with ceremony, decorated with the symbols of 4 to 7 surrenders, clicked against the heated floor as I approached them. I stopped a few meters away, looking down at them where they sat, and I felt the strangeness of it, that I had crossed from my position of absolute engineered authority to stand closer to them, and somehow the distance between us had not decreased at all. "In 3,000 years," I began, "the Coratheian Empire has not retreated, has not apologized, has not admitted error. There is a first time for everything," Nakamura said quietly. I looked at Threxus, at my officers in their circle of power, at the holographic displays cycling through footage of glorious conquest that suddenly felt like a story I had been telling about someone else. "You came here laughing," I said, "not because you thought we were harmless. You laughed because you were predictable," Torres said, "not cruelly, not triumphantly, simply as a matter of fact. Every bully follows the same script. Show up, make the threats, wait for compliance. We've seen it from each other for 10,000 years. We know every line." She looked at me steadily. "And then you met us, and we didn't flinch, and you didn't have a next page." The word, bully, landed somewhere I hadn't expected it to reach. "We could still destroy your planet," I said. But even as the words left my secondary jaw, I heard them for what they were. A man trying to recover his footing after a fall by insisting he had meant to trip. "Could you?" Marcus asked. He had finished his sandwich and was watching me with those human eyes, curious, open, direct. "Because we've been running the analysis since you arrived. Your weapon cycle times, your shield refresh rates, your crew rotations. We know your fleet's operational patterns better than your subcommanders do." He paused. "Also, your breakfast on third meal shift, protein paste gamma, is that genuinely what you eat by choice, or is that a supply chain problem? Because it looks absolutely miserable." "It is," Threxus muttered, before he could stop himself. "We have been studying you," I said slowly. The realization arrived not as a shock, but as something that had been building beneath the surface of every exchange, finally breaking through. "Since the moment we arrived." "Since 3 hours before you arrived, technically," Nakamura said, "we detected the hyperspace signatures. We had time to prepare." Her voice remained gentle, but it carried the calm of someone delivering truth that they had no pleasure in. "Commander, we have monitored your Empire's communications. We know what you do to species that refuse your terms. The orbital campaigns, the cultural erasure programs, the forced labor systems that your records categorize as integration. You call it order. The species living under it call it something else. You call it tyranny," Torres said, "because that's what it is." She was standing now. I hadn't noticed when she'd risen, and she crossed the remaining distance between us until she was close enough that I could see the details in those strange two-lobed eyes. "You told yourself you were bringing civilization, but every species you incorporated had one thing in common. They couldn't fight back. That's not civilization, Commander. That's just domination wearing a better coat." The silence that followed was the longest I had ever sat inside. Torres extended her hand. That small, unarmored, entirely vulnerable human appendage offered openly into the space between us. "So here's the actual deal," she said. You leave our system. You return to your empire and tell them that humanity politely, firmly, and permanently declined. In exchange, we don't embarrass you. We open diplomatic channels. We share what we can share, medical advances, agricultural technology, things that actually help people rather than control them. And maybe, over time, we show your empire that there's more to being a civilization than the size of your weapons. I looked at her hand for a long moment. In Coratheian culture, physical contact carries weight. It is reserved for moments of genuine consequence, combat, ceremony, the formal acknowledgement of equals. I understood what the gesture meant from their cultural files. The deliberate vulnerability of it. The trust embedded in offering something you cannot defend without needing to. I reached out with my primary manipulator and closed it gently around her hand. It was warm, soft, impossibly fragile in my grip. I could have ended the handshake in a single movement. Instead, I matched the gentle back-and-forth rhythm of the gesture, and I said, "One condition." Torres raised an eyebrow. "Next time you want to visit," I said, "go ahead." Her face broke open into something genuine. Not the strategic warmth she had deployed so skillfully throughout this encounter, but something real and unguarded and human. "Deal," she said, "and we'll bring better sandwiches." "Your food is genuinely terrible," I said. "It grows on you." That is not a selling point. And in the grand negotiation chamber, the eternal dominion, beneath 40 meters of obsidian ceiling in the gaze of 12 decorated officers, with holographic footage of Imperial glory cycling on every wall, Commander Vecklish, Thirdclaw of the Coratheian Empire, conqueror of 4 to 7 worlds, laughed. It was a sound none of my crew had ever heard from me before. The fleet withdrew in good order. I gave a command myself, watching through the viewport as 300 warships reversed formation with the same mechanical precision that had brought us here. Only this time, the direction was away. Behind us, the small blue-green planet continued its rotation without interruption, its 9 billion inhabitants largely unaware that anything significant had occurred. Some of them, I was told later, had been following the events through their digital networks, which apparently broadcast everything to everyone simultaneously in real time. Several of them had made jokes about the anthem. 3 months after our withdrawal, a package arrived at the neutral station where our ongoing negotiations had moved. A real negotiation now, with chairs, with an agenda, with a careful and sometimes frustrating work of 2 civilizations trying to learn each other's shape. The package bore Earth's diplomatic seal. Inside was a single-frame photograph. It had been taken, I realized, during that first meeting in the Grand Chamber. By whom? I still don't know, because I had been too occupied with everything else to notice a camera. The image showed all 3 humans sitting on my heated floor. Marcus was mid-bite, eyes already drifting toward the wall behind him. Torres was grinning at the camera with the full open brightness of someone who has just gotten exactly what she came for. Nakamura was sitting with her back perfectly straight and her hands folded in her lap, and she was not quite smiling, but she was also very much not smiling. At the bottom, in handwriting that leaned slightly left, Torres had written, "To Vecklish, proof that sometimes the best diplomacy happens on the floor. Thanks for being willing to come down to our level. Next time, better sandwiches." Torres. I hung it in my private quarters, directly across from my command desk, where I would see it every time I looked up from whatever decision I was trying to make. The Coratheian Empire is changing. It is slow, and it is painful, and it moves against 3,000 years of momentum that does not simply reverse because a Thirdclaw had a conversation on a heated floor. There are officers in high command who will not accept the treaty. There are worlds within our borders where the old ways are too entrenched to shift quickly. There are mornings when I sit at my desk and look at that photograph and feel the weight of everything that still needs to be undone. But it is changing, because we encountered a species that looked at 300 warships assembled in the shape of a claw reaching down from heaven, and laughed. Not from ignorance, not from madness, not from the reckless bravado of the unarmed, but from the bone-deep certainty of beings who had already faced everything and come through the other side, and found that the universe's worst was simply not as frightening as advertised. They didn't defeat us with technology, though theirs was more sophisticated than we had any right to expect. They didn't defeat us with force, though they had more of it than we had allowed ourselves to see. They defeated us with something that no weapon in the Imperial arsenal had ever been designed to counter. They defeated us by simply, completely, and utterly refusing to be afraid. And then, after winning, they sat down on our floor and ate a sandwich. Humans. I have studied them for 3 months now, and I am certain of one thing. I will never fully understand them. They are contradictory, infuriating, absurd, and occasionally genuinely dangerous in ways that are very easy to underestimate because they laugh while being dangerous. They argue with each other constantly and somehow arrive at good decisions anyway. They carry technology sophisticated enough to fool our best sensor arrays inside a diplomatic envoy's robe pocket, and then use it to introduce themselves rather than to attack. They name their children after stars. They have a holiday where they intentionally frighten each other for entertainment. They decided, at some point in their history, that the correct response to nearly going extinct 6 times was to write it down, examine what went wrong, and try to do better. They are, in every sense of the word, remarkable. And on the day I finally sit across from Torres in a negotiation room with actual chairs and better sandwiches, with a draft treaty on the table and 2 civilizations in the room instead of 1, I will tell her something I have been carrying since that first conversation, that we came to conquer them. And instead, they conquered us, with the most powerful weapon in the known universe, the refusal to be afraid. This story is published by Hybrid Shadows. My name is Commander Vecklish, Thirdclaw of the Coratheian Empire, and I have never lost. That is not arrogant speaking. It is simply the cleanest summary of 4 to 2 years of service, 7 decorations, and 4 to 7 star systems brought peacefully into the fold of Imperial civilization. Peacefully being a relative term, of course. There is nothing peaceful about 300 warships materializing from hyperspace directly above your homeworld like the fist of some ancient god. But the end result tends to be bloodless. Species see our fleet. They see our weapons cycling through their menacing warm-up sequence. They hear the Imperial Anthem vibrating through the hull of every ship simultaneously. That deep, haunting melody composed specifically to trigger existential dread in carbon-based life forms. And they call their governments. And their governments call us. And we accept their surrender over tea. It is efficient. It is elegant. It is, as we say aboard the Eternal Dominion, the Coratheian way. So when High Command assigned me to incorporate the humans of a small blue-green planet in a relatively unremarkable corner of the galaxy, I felt what I can only describe as professional contentment. Humans. I had read the files. Bipedal, mostly hairless, alarmingly fragile physiology, divided into hundreds of squabbling political factions on a single heavily polluted world. Their space presence amounted to a handful of satellites, 1 modest orbital station, and a few lonely probes drifting through their outer system like messages in bottles tossed into an infinite ocean. I had conquered more formidable civilizations before breakfast. We dropped from hyperspace at 0600 standard. I told my bridge crew the evening before. Full talent of dominance formation. I want every weapon port glowing and every hull polished to a mirror shine. The humans will have 3 seconds of visual contact before they fully register what they are seeing, and I want those 3 seconds to do all the convincing we need. Sub-Commander Threxus, my second-in-command and a soldier of impeccable instincts, snapped to attention with a crisp efficiency that had made him invaluable across a dozen campaigns. And the Anthem, Commander, all frequencies, maximum amplitude. I want it playing in their dream cycles. He allowed himself the smallest satisfied ripple of his scales, the Coratheian equivalent of a grin. Shall I prepare the standard surrender terms? Already drafted, I said, settling into my command throne. This will be over by second moonrise. I was, as it turns out, catastrophically wrong. The drop from hyperspace was, if I may say so, spectacular. 300 warships, each the approximate size of a small moon, tore through the fabric of space-time with a synchronized precision that had taken decades to perfect. Our reactive armor, capable of deflecting asteroid impacts without leaving a scratch, caught the local star's light and scattered it in all directions, turning our entire fleet into a blinding constellation that had no business existing in that corner of the galaxy. Our weapon ports cycled through their warm-up sequence, glowing from deep crimson to molten orange to the searing white-hot that preceded actual deployment. And the Anthem, that ancient, aching melody built from 17 different harmonic registers, poured from every ship simultaneously, flooding every communication frequency in the system. It was, by any objective measure, magnificent. Scanning their homeworld now, "Commander," Threxus announced from his tactical station. His scales rippled with anticipatory satisfaction. "Initial readings are, oh." A pause. "Oh my." I leaned forward in the command throne. "Report." "So." He cleared his throat. 9 billion individual organisms on a single planetary surface. No population controls of any kind. Their atmosphere shows measurable industrial contamination. They are still burning fossil fuels in some regions. Commander. Fossil fuels. The kind that require biological matter to decompose for hundreds of millions of years before they become usable. And they are burning them. "Like savages," muttered Lieutenant Praxis from the weapons console. "Their electromagnetic spectrum is absolutely cluttered," Threxus continued, his tone hovering somewhere between disgust and amazement. "Radio signals, digital transmissions, entertainment broadcasts. They are radiating noise in every direction simultaneously, as if they want the universe to find them." He paused again, reviewing something on his screen. "Say, I am picking up what appears to be a cooking competition on 47 separate channels." "Space presence?" I asked, refusing to be derailed. "Minimal. A few hundred satellites in low orbit, functional but unsophisticated. One station. Some scientific probes in the outer system. One of them has been traveling for over 400 of their years and has just barely reached the edge of their solar system." He shook his head. "Commander, this is going to be faster than the Flender Collective. They surrendered before we finished the opening hail." I allowed myself a satisfied rumble deep in my primary chest cavity. Everything was proceeding exactly as anticipated. "So." Threxus looked up, his expression shifting to mild confusion. "I am detecting several vessels breaking away from the orbital station. They appear to be approaching our position." "Battle formation." "Commander, they are civilian transports. Cargo haulers. Science vessels. Maybe. They are hailing us on multiple frequencies." He looked at me with something I rarely saw in his eyes, genuine puzzlement. "They are not running." I straightened in my throne and adjusted the ceremonial cloak that marked my rank. "Open a channel. Full visual and audio. Let them see exactly what stands before them." The view screen flickered to life, and I got my first look at a human. The creature was small, even by the standards of the smaller species we had encountered. Soft-looking, with only 2 eyes set symmetrically in a round face, no visible natural weapons, no scales or armored plating, no secondary jaw or reinforced skull ridge. It wore some kind of woven fabric covering and sat in what appeared to be a cockpit of modest engineering, surrounded by blinking lights and outdated instrumentation. Its mouth curved upward at the corners in an expression I did not immediately have a category for. Then it spoke.